got one from Nice Guys this time around. So, I play Dungeons & Dragons every Friday night with a group of friends. There is one guy in the group who treats any woman he deems unattractive like crap and hounds any woman he finds attractive. After being rejected for the millionth time by one of the lady players, he posted this. Rant time. I have to get this off my chest after so many thoughts over the last few days. Ladies, quit being so shallow. If a guy thinks you're pretty, at least give him a chance. Do you know how hard it is for a nice and decent guy to build up the nerve to tell you something nice in hopes for a chance only to once again to be shot down and make that guy feel like crap again? I mean, come on, is it that hard? Or do all of you ladies out there who are single like to wait for the douchebag a-holes who always hurt you or won't pay you any mind or are already with someone that he'll you in your desperation for that a-hole's douchebag might be willing to break up their relationship for you? Hello? Translation, please. Don't you think they will do the same to you as they did for you? Pull your head out of your bum. Us nice guys do exist. Look, I get it. When you're in a heightened emotional state, you're not really thinking about grammar, but for the love of God, write better. Holy crap. Can you people learn the difference between there and there and there? Oh, and stop being a creepy, misogynistic nice guy. That too. So I've been playing D&D on and off ever since I was 7 and always struggled to find groups to play with. Relatively recently, around late June, I was running a campaign with my friend group where one of my players approached me and invited me to play Curse of Strahd with some other people from my campaign. This player, let's call him Nice Guy, would be running it as the game master. I've known Nice Guy for forever and he's one of my closest friends. I trust him with a lot of things and he's helped me through some tough mental health problems and was the reason I'm a lot better mentally today. But then I learned that this one other player was also coming to these sessions. This player, let's call him Loudmouth, was interesting. At first, I let him into my campaign because of one of my other friends. Let's call this one, I don't know, Beard Guy. He told me he had never played D&D before, and I was down to teach him. I was running a light mystery game with a few combat and mind games, but this guy, Loudmouth, had just no filter. I usually ran my games at my house with my younger brothers, who are 12, and I asked him kindly just not to curse in front of them as it doesn't sit well. Nice Guy obliged, even if he usually is quite nonchalant when it comes to cursing, which, I mean, I don't care, it was just for the little brothers. Loudmouth, on the other hand, had a lot of trouble controlling it. At first, I was understanding because he was in a similar mental health spot that I was in a couple years ago, at least allegedly, and struggled with ADHD and depression, so I tried to accommodate him. I mistakenly let him have his phone to fiddle with while we were playing when it was not his turn. For the most part, it was fine until I ran my session at a game store this one time. I had a good standing with the store, and they would regularly give me tables for free. I regularly shop there, so they know me, and it's a smaller game shop. When Loudmouth, who was playing a game on his phone, lost it and just yelled, "Can't say any of that out loud." But he said it out loud for the entire rest of the game store to hear. Thankfully, I was able to talk it out with the game store owner, but I never ran a session there again due to the hot water I was now in with them. The reason this is important is that he is also like this during other sessions, constantly interrupting the dungeon master, whether it be me or Nice Guy, and always tried to advance whatever he was doing without letting other players in on the in-character conversations. Or he just slowed down the game in general by interrupting combat with jokes. Now, back to Curse of Strahd, Loudmouth was actually pretty well behaved, until the second session where he reverted back to being, well, a loudmouth. At the time, there were 6 people involved in the campaign, listed as follows. 1 was Nice Guy as the Dungeon Master, 2 was Beard Guy, playing a human fighter, 3 was another close friend of mine, let's call him Tall Guy, playing a homebrew race blood hunter. It's like a subset of tiefling. Pretty tame, mostly just dealing with the intimidation factor of them. There was also some other person I didn't really know, let's call him Food Guy. He was playing a reborn paladin. 5 was Loudmouth, initially playing a lizard folk sorcerer, and then me, playing a human monk gunslinger. Huh, wonder what that looked like. As long as I've remembered, I've always fought with nothing but my hands. I want as much control as possible over whether or not I take someone's life. Yeah, but what if the bad guy's flying? What? Like, you know, if they're far away from you, do you just throw rocks at them? Well, I have other options.
1 hour later.
Okay, so spoilers for the first area of Curse of Strahd. You have been warned, I'm serious. So we arrived at this sacrificial altar beneath a manor, and after a lot of discussion what to do, being all first-time players playing Strahd, we decided to sacrifice Loudmouth's character, which he was actually cool with. Nice Guy, our dungeon master, was dumbfounded and explained that we just avoided a house full of traps by doing so. Well, next session, Loudmouth had prepared yet another character. You see, Nice Guy, being very understanding and letting players have a lot of freedom, allowed Loudmouth's request to play, wait for it, a Ben 10 alien. Yeah, I'm not sure about you, but that's a little off for Curse of Strahd, but I was cool with it until he revealed his racial bonuses. The cons are he cannot wear armor and has disadvantage on stealth. The pros, on the other hand, 18 armor class with natural armor, 30 feet burrow speed by morphing his hands into drills. He can cause earth tremors by morphing his hands into heavy metal balls, dealing 1d8 force damage to every creature within 50 feet of him, can morph his hands between usable hands, drills, and heavy metal balls, can transform his hands to do 1d8 slashing, piercing, or bludgeoning damage, depending on what his arms are morphed into, and all of this compacted into a medium creature. Alright, not gonna lie, I was always a classic Sirius and Alien Force kind of guy, but leave your guesses down below, because I'm pretty sure this is Armadillo from Ultimate Alien, though you might have a different opinion. Fellow Ben 10 fans, discuss in the comments. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I signed up to play Curse of Strahd, I want to feel like I'm in danger, not letting Loudmouth play as a main character and do whatever he wants. In fact, the way he arrived was a crash landing in an alien pod, which Beard Guy blew up somehow, and for the rest of the session, Loudmouth would never shut up about it, always saying in character, "Who destroyed my pod?" and interrupting the dungeon master constantly, and generally being very main character-ish, and I couldn't take it anymore. I've kicked him out of my campaign and left the Curse of Strahd campaign, which sucks because it was the only time I could hang out with Nice Guy and Tall Guy, whom I'd grown close to a bit. Not romantically, by the way. Anyway, am I the a-hole? The answer here is more obvious than it usually is, but drumroll please. Not the a-hole! Obviously. Look, this guy's got a bad attitude in general. Look, I get it, you get really excited, but sometimes you just don't want to play with that one kid from middle school, and that's okay. Look, I empathize that some people can't keep their mouths shut for a variety of reasons, but I don't need to stick around to deal with it, okay? Also, yeah, playing as a giant yellow drill thing in Curse of Strahd might be a little bit immersion breaking. You need to play characters that actually fit into the world and the story the GM is creating. Don't let it be too restrictive, but at the same time, yeah, stuff like this might ruin the vibe for the rest of the party, especially in a highly immersive game like Curse of Strahd. Look, if you don't want to deal with that kind of thing, it's perfectly okay for you to walk away and find someone who will run a Strahd game that more fits the tone you're looking for. I'm running two campaigns right now, a sci-fi game and a traditional fantasy game, and finding maps for both is such a pain. My notes are way worse now because I'm spending hours just trying to find maps for my combats. It's getting dire. It would be a dream come true if I had a site where I could browse through sci-fi maps and fantasy maps easier. Thank God for CzePeku. This video is sponsored by CzePeku, back once again to show you guys some of the highest quality TTRPG maps you can find on the market. CzePeku have recently revamped their website, making it easier than ever to browse through their hundreds of maps and thousands of variants. This is made even easier by the themes. Now you can search through every single map and every single variant by theme. Need something brutal and hellish? Need something that takes place in the depths of a cavern? Or something in the frozen wastes? They've got that all covered for you. Now, easier to search than ever. Not only can you get maps for Dungeons and Dragons and traditional fantasy, there is also a link to CzePeku Sci-Fi where you can get maps for games like Starfinder and general sci-fi settings. It's easy as that to have access to both this haunted ghost ship underneath a fantasy ocean covered in the undead spirits of the fallen, while also having this gorgeous capital ship worthy of the mightiest of space captains. Both of these patrons simply starting at the $1 tier. If you guys are interested, you can check out the incredible Patreon for CzePeku. It's linked in the description. And I've also linked their newly revamped website if you want to check out the maps before you buy. If you're not convinced yet, trust me. Looking at these things, it's gonna convince you. But yeah, thank you so much to CzePeku for sponsoring today's video. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. And without further ado, I'm gonna turn back into an animated rat so we can get back to the video. This happened a few years ago, and my memory is not the best, so some details might not be exactly detailed. The important characters are myself, playing an owlin bard inspired by an 80s rocker lifestyle, the Dungeon Master is the Dungeon Master, and Warlock, a kobold warlock who actually had a really cool backstory of previously being an actual dragon, but something happened. I never found out what that forced him into the form of a kobold. There were a few other characters, but they're not really important to the story. All you should know is that everyone in the story has been friends all throughout and since high school. We were playing a homebrew campaign set in Strixhaven. The first session went really well. We were given the usual college orientation stuff. We met some founding dragons, had our first classes, joined a nice fighting ring, character interactions were fun, it was great. We also met one of the NPCs that come straight from the Strixhaven book. I don't remember all of the ones we met, but the important one for the story is a gnome named Rosie. Rosie and Warlock, well, they had a bit of chemistry going, but nothing really obvious. Honestly, it might have been just because they were both small. I should also note here that the Warlock is a player who is generally not really romantic. I suspect he might have been asexual, but I could also be totally wrong. Anyway, all that to say, he wasn't really interested in any sort of relationship, whether it be in or out of game. I don't remember if everything went wrong in sessions 2 or 3, but it's not really important. Eventually, we had some time between classes, and my character wanted to do some flirting because, you know, rocker lifestyle, and he was trying to get over a bad breakup, so he wasn't exactly in the mood to make great decisions. He found a group of gals chatting off to the side, walked up to the orc that seemed to be in charge, and led with a line that should not in any universe have worked. What those tusks do. I don't get it. And then I rolled a natural 20 and somehow got all 3 of the girls to meet my character in his dorm after class. Some jokes were shared around the table and further joking invitations were given to the other party members. Most declined outright, but Warlock kind of kept the joke going. Eventually, we cut to the dorm room just in time for the fun to begin. Warlock and Rosie had actually decided to show up as well. The Dungeon Master requested I roll a performance check, to which I thought nothing of it. I rolled pretty mediocre and thought we would just move on with a fade to black and not much fanfare. But then he actually went on to give some description. Nothing too graphic, just describing the pace, really. But it was more than I was expecting. Then he asked me to roll another performance check. I rolled and the Dungeon Master gave a similar explanation of events. And I thought, okay, surely that's the last one, right? Wrong. He tells me to roll a third performance check, and then the awkward, dry description of things kept on going. One check for each girl, I guess, but nothing about his descriptions made me think that that was supposed to be the case. Unfortunately, this wasn't the worst of what happened. If you remember, Rosie and Warlock were also here, and this is where the actual worst happens. Having finally actually seen what's going on, Warlock's character decides that this isn't something he wanted to be a part of. Fine, right? Well, Rosie, aka the Dungeon Master, disagreed. Rosie, still as a Dungeon Master, really wanted Warlock to stay. So much so that the DM had Warlock roll to get past Rosie, then had them roll one more contested grapple check after Warlock failed to escape. In between rolls, Warlock described his character's screams and efforts to get away from this insane gnome. The DM even described to the other players how they could hear his screams in the other dorm. Unfortunately, the RNG gods had forsaken Warlock. He failed his grapple checks, and without getting graphic, Rosie...
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I feel terrible for not speaking up, but I was already embarrassed from earlier, and no one else, not even Warlock, was saying anything, so I just let it play out. I'm not trying to make excuses, just explaining what I was thinking to justify to myself not having done anything. To answer the obvious question, yeah, no, there was no session 0. We were all close friends and had no problems like this in any of our other campaigns, so we all assumed this would be no different. Although Warlock was typically the DM for those, so maybe that's why. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I'm so thankful that campaign fell apart before the next session simply due to scheduling issues. Oh my god, I've actually seen something kind of similar to this play out in an actual play, where somebody begins a somewhat NSFW scenario, mostly for humorous purposes, but then the Dungeon Master escalates it to extremely uncomfortable territory to the point where no one wants to stay anymore. If you know, you know, oh my lord. But the point is that, yeah, this is horrible behavior from this Dungeon Master. What they did here would make anyone uncomfortable. And I understand that, oh, it was already an NSFW scenario. That does not matter. It was mostly played out as a joking thing and was expected to be fade to black. Though I will say, those expectations weren't set. However, that's not the player's responsibility. The DM needs to lead that charge. In fact, the DM wasn't really leading anything other than an effort to be extremely creepy towards the poor Warlock. Look, Session 0 isn't a silver bullet, but even with good friends, it is something that is necessary because with stuff like this, any sort of mitigation really helps out. A few years ago, when I was in high school, I got really into Dungeons & Dragons lore, along with a friend of mine. We wanted to play a game, but we really didn't have anyone to DM for us, and we thought that maybe a professional might be the best option to help us really learn what the game was about. So, we hired a Dungeon Master. Now, I have to say, I have no problem with paid DMs, obviously. They provide a professional service for fun when they wouldn't otherwise, and we were more than happy to pay him for that. But this goes beyond that, as you will see. Our campaign is set in the Forgotten Realm, but the campaign is homebrewed. The setting is somewhat post-apocalyptic here. We generally went through the first month or two just fine with no issues. Our characters, there were 5 of us at the table plus the Dungeon Master, began to buy more equipment and actively search for magic items to strengthen our characters. It was kind of necessary as this campaign was brutal. The first red flag came when we talked to this NPC about a quest for this bone bow, a magic item in the Underdark, but he would only tell us the location if we paid him. We assumed he meant in-game gold and asked how much gold. Then, the bomb drops. The DM, in character, says, "Oh no, your gold is no good here. I will require something a little bit more green." Yeah, he really was that cringe about it. He wanted $10 friggin' for an in-game magic item. We all figured out what he was talking about, and we just looked at him like, what the heck? He tried to trick us into thinking this was normal for paid games, since we were all new players, but even back then, we were suspicious. But we didn't really have that frame of reference, and we liked the game, so we stupidly decided to simply reject the quest and move on. The microtransactions only got worse. A couple of weeks after that, I remember that we were leveling up after defeating a mini-boss. Our wizard was in that process of leveling up, and he wanted to wait to choose his subclass for roleplay purposes. But now, he was level 5, and he decided to go with Chronergy. The DM then tells him, "Nice choice, you'll go far with Chronergy. It will only be $20. At that point, Wizard started calling him out in real life. He said the Dungeon Master was ripping them all off, and the DM said it was an elite subclass and is kind of overpowered. Is it?
Chronergy wizards are all about time magic, and they're totally OP.
Oh. Well, if D&D Short says it, it's science. You can't argue with science. All right. Anyway, he also said it was basically the price of 1 extra session. He then tried to make Wizard feel like he was greedy and petty for not paying for 1 measly extra session. Wizard then straight up called him a greedy and left the table. We didn't follow him. Man, we were idiots back then. We really thought that this would be our only chance of playing Dungeons & Dragons and that we could just avoid these ridiculous microtransactions. Well, we were wrong. Over the next couple of months, the DM gradually added more and more microtransactions to the game, usually in the form of prestigious gear or weapons sold at vendors. We still had not actually bought anything, which seemed to make the Dungeon Master angry. He gradually got worse to the point of where we were legitimately unprepared for encounters if we didn't buy anything. I remember talking to the party in a secret group chat. The DM hated the idea of us talking behind his back. So you want to meet up at like, I don't know, 3 p.m.? Yeah, this should work for me. Yeah, I know it's a little late for coffee, but, thanks for agreeing to... What are you two conspiring? Dude, we're just talking about meeting up for coffee. What?
Don't lie to me. You're talking behind my back. Again, I need to be involved in every conversation.
Yeah, you know we don't spend every second of our lives just talking about your game, right? Like, we can have conversations and relationships that just don't involve you, right?
Fine. I will allow it. For now. Also, the price of sessions going up. I have OnlyFans subscriptions to pay for.
We debated whether or not to cave to his financial demands or just leave the game. We ended up once again compromising and deciding to play just without buying anything. We would struggle and potentially die a few times, but we thought we could at least just finish the campaign. Call it the sunk cost fallacy, if you will. That brings us to one of the most important quests of the game. The DM hyped up like it was nobody's business. We were going to the corrupted Feywild to find out the secrets of this noble house that would help us to learn the weakness of the big bad evil guy and either save the world or conquer it instead. We get the mission, and the quest giver tells us that we need a special type of gas mask to survive in the Feywild due to the toxic air from the evil corruption. The gear would cost us $50. Not gold, not platinum, 50 real-life dollars each. There was no other way to reach the Feywild, as we had tried in passing throughout the campaign. The Dungeon Master was effectively charging us to play the main story that he was already charging us for. I don't know how I grew a pair that day, but every single one of us looked at the DM with disgust, got up, and just walked out. The DM then tried to beg us to come back. He tried to tell us BS about how we can technically progress through the story without it. He then tried to offer us discounts until he realized we weren't coming back, and he decided to just unleash a volley of insults at us. TLDR, greedy Dungeon Master tries to extort the party through microtransactions. We finally grow a pair when he effectively locks part of the main story behind a friggin' paywall, and we just walk out. Look, I already could not afford paid D&D as is. I cannot imagine needing to pay $50 to just progress through the plot you're already paying for. That is ridiculous. One small thing that bothers me before we get into the microtransactions: DMs out there, you don't need to be part of every single one of your players' interactions. Seriously, it's something we've seen a couple times, though I've never addressed it. Some DMs want to just control their players in every conversation they have. That is ridiculous. Look, players are going to form friendships amongst themselves, and I'm sorry, but you're not going to be a part of everything, and that's okay. This DM thinking that they're talking behind his back is a brilliant, glowing sign for a toxic environment, even if in this case, they were actually talking about him for good reason. These microtransactions are ridiculous and do not belong in a D&D game. Look, you're already being paid. You don't need to fleece your party out of everything they owe. I was going to make a joke about this being Baldur's Gate if it was designed by Ubisoft, but heck, even in Ubisoft's worst Assassin's Creed games, you can still progress without microtransactions. Holy crap. This is how I accidentally destroyed a Dungeons & Dragons group when one of them hit on me. The characters of the story are me, 19 female, playing a half-orc fighter, and Sorcerer, 50 male, playing a human sorcerer. Oh god. I had just finished my first year of college, and I decided to go to a game store on my night off of work. It turns out, on that night, a group was meeting to play D&D there. One of the guys from the group, Sorcerer, comes up to me and asks if I want to join them to play. I was unprepared and had to be home that night, but I gave him my number, and he told me that they met at the same time and the same place every week, which was perfect for me. I was actually pretty excited because I hadn't played much at the time, and everyone in the group seemed really nice. In hindsight, it wasn't a great idea to play with strangers, but I was flattered to be invited to play with them, though I soon found out that Sorcerer had a motive for inviting me. Fast forward to the next week, and I come with my complete character and backstory that I talked about with DM and Sorcerer beforehand because Sorcerer occasionally DM'd himself. The other players are another fighter, a bard, a druid, 2 more sorcerers, and a paladin. It was a pretty big group. When I met the other players and characters, I found out that Sorcerer and I have the most detailed backstories out of everyone. Not shaming how anyone likes to play, detailed backstories is just what I like. I can tell that Sorcerer noticed it too because he's super interested in my character and made a comment about us being the only ones who take it seriously. I really don't think much of it at the time. Not long after I joined the group, Sorcerer messaged me privately asking me out to dinner. I told him no, and that I have a boyfriend. That was fine with him, and he said that he would still take me out to dinner as friends if I wanted, but I work late at night, so I still declined. After that, he said that his character would want to be romantically involved with mine to piss off his racist ancestors, but I told him that my character would not be interested in his, so he let it go. However, when we got into combat, Sorcerer would always use haste on my character, which did help a lot, but he described it as his character
Escalated quickly.
This made me super uncomfortable, but I just described how she glared at him and kept fighting. Every time we were in combat, he would do this. Eventually, the party came across a friendly Minotaur NPC, and my character was smitten. I asked the DM if they could date, and he agreed, so now she had a buff boyfriend who would hopefully ward off the 50-year-old sorcerer. Little did I know, this was the beginning of the end. A session or two later, Sorcerer messaged me to let me know that he was going to run a couple of sessions, and told me how it was going to revolve around my backstory. I was immediately worried that I would be treated like a main character, especially with how many people are in our group. I even told Sorcerer my concern, but he said if anyone had a problem with it, they should have made better characters. So I wearily went to that session, and it starts with a festival where my character soon gets kidnapped, leaving the party behind to fight some henchmen. I'm told about how my character wakes up in a comfortable bed in a floating palace, and I have to marry a guy from my background. We spend a long time focused on me being forced to be magically bonded to this NPC, and when focus goes back to the party, their only role is to come get me. I'm totally being forced to be the main character against my will, and forced to marry Sorcerer via NPC, but we had to continue the story into another session. I decided that I was going to kill my character to remove the issue, and just play a male character to keep on playing. Killing my character was exactly what I did with a dramatic moment, focused on defying this NPC she was forced to be bonded to. The other players held a funeral for my character, and it was actually very touching. I did actually run the next session for the group, and I unfortunately had to tell everyone that I wouldn't be returning for future sessions due to my work schedule changing and significant changes in my life in general, although I won't deny Sorcerer was a big factor in me leaving. Then, in a total shock for the group, Sorcerer messaged the group chat to say he would no longer be part of the group either, and not to message him again. We were all left confused, and this is the last time the group played together. Oh my god. Okay, so ignoring the fact that Sorcerer wants to play out gender-flipped MILF manner through his D&D game, yeah, all of this behavior is simply gross. There's not really much to say about it. It's even worse because eventually Sorcerer got power over the group in the form of becoming the Dungeon Master, and this is why often I say that problem DMs are way worse than problem players. Like, I get why problem players are bad, but DMs have this perception of power that just absolutely sucks. But it's important to remember that it's a perception of power. At the end of the day, you're still just dumb humans playing a friggin' board game, and if you're not comfortable with these situations, you need to walk away, because somebody who is bold enough to take this kind of action is not smart enough or humble enough to admit when they're wrong. Alright, that last story was certainly something. I had to re-record half this episode because of a bug, so really hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips episode. We just did a great episode yesterday. You guys seem to be enjoying it. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern, get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, dude, that's a bit creepy, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, you can send them directly to us. There's an email in the description. Send the tavern your stories for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell. As long as I can remember, I've always fought with my hands. I want as much control as I can. So, as long as I've remembered, I've always just fought with my hands.